Police have revealed they returned to the Mid-North property where GUS LAMONT went missing, with detectives again speaking with the 4-year-old's family last week. Police today reiterating this is not a simple investigation and all avenues are being explored.
Police have returned to Oak Park Station as the search continues for GUS LAMONT. Detectives last week took statements from the family of the 4-year-old, which is part of the normal investigation process.
We've taken statements from the family. We've had to go through those statements with the family, and that's just part of the normal investigational process that we go through. We continue to engage with them. This went through a pretty torrid Christmas, obviously, without Gus, and we check in with the family regularly.
The little boy was last seen on September 27 playing out the front of his homestead. He hasn't been seen since, his family spending Christmas without their little boy.
That's right, 3.5 months after 4-year-old GUS LAMONT disappeared, and while most of us were preoccupied with the frivolities of the festive season, South Australia cops discreetly returned to Oak Park Station, the house, not the wider property, to talk to Gus's former guardians.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't breathe. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
So have you noticed there's been very, very little news on GUS LAMONT for the past couple of weeks? There's quite a lot of news and then suddenly nothing for a while. And then a week after the police went to the property, we found out that they went there. And that in itself is quite strange that this has been kept, it feels like this has been kept kind of quiet. And this is something that the police don't seem to want to acknowledge, is that maybe we do need to speak to the family more carefully and with more sort of circumspection and critical thinking, something we've been saying on this channel for quite a while. And so it seems that they've done that, but kind of in a, perhaps we simply just didn't know, but it does seem to be something that has been quite discreet, doesn't it? Now, according to news.com.au, police have confirmed they went to the property about 43 kilometers south of Yunta on around New Year's Day and spoke to the young boy's family, who are continuing to cooperate with police. Now, I do think the timing of all of this is really interesting, because it's at a time when a lot of people, ordinary people, but also journalists, have got a lot of other things going on. So the timing of this, I wouldn't call it interrogation, but questioning, is certainly interesting. It's at a time when the best time when no one would really be paying any attention. If you think about it from the perspective even of the police and of the people they're questioning, who would want to be questioned on New Year's Day about anything or around about that time? Now, of course, they haven't told us what the questioning was specifically about, but they have said, we've taken statements with the family, this according to news.com.au. We've also had to go through those statements with the family, and they say that's just part of the normal investigational process that we go through. In other words, nothing to see here. That's just absolutely normal, blah, blah, blah. Is it? Is it normal that you would go back 3.5 months later and say, you know what, you told us this, and, well, does it make sense? And quite a few things don't make sense. Let's go through a couple of them now. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis worthwhile, please do hit the thanks button. Like, your support definitely encourages me to keep following this particular case. So if you do want to hit the thanks button, please do, and let's continue. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, taking a statement from the family, again, 3.5 months later, is likely because their initial statements were insufficient. And when they say we've had to go through those statements, do they mean that the statements that they first took, the questions that they first asked them and what was originally said, have they had to sort of review that and say, well, maybe you need to give us some more information here, and maybe what you said there doesn't really make sense. Can you explain it? In other words, perhaps what was originally said hasn't actually stood up to scrutiny. Remember, the story was that Gus wandered off, and yet there's been no evidence now that he did wander off. Another question the cops probably needed to ask was for absolute proof of life. When did some other party, besides family members, observe Gus? Besides the folks on the property, where was Gus seen? I would also want to look at other photographic proof of Gus as well. Another serious question is why no one alerted the boy's father, Joshua? What was that all about? Joshua only found out that his son had been missing when the cops came knocking at his door early the next morning. None of his family members let him know. Why not? Remember, Joshua was living in a farmhouse in Ballali North, which is about a 2-hour drive from the Murray's Outback Sheep Station. I would also want to know what the plans were for Gus. Was he going to join his father? Was Jessica and Ronnie, that's Gus's 1-year-old brother and mother, were they going to join Joshua as well? And if that's the case, how did Shannon and Josie feel about this? Yet another question that arises is, how come the police had to figure out the existence and whereabouts of mine shafts on the property months after the fact? One of them was just 5.5 kilometers from the homestead. Remember, the search of these shafts occurred on November 24th when Gus disappeared ostensibly on September 27th. Why did it take so long to ascertain that these shafts existed and where they were? In other words, how come the property owners couldn't provide this information right in the beginning? Gus may have wandered off while you're doing your very first search. Maybe you want to search in these mine shafts. That's a possible area where he could have disappeared. And I remember that was mentioned right in the beginning, but they weren't searched in the beginning. Another issue that came up was the grandmother, Josie, claiming that she never brandished or threatened the Daily Mail journalist with a firearm, and even the police repeated this claim. When you can very clearly see, not only in the video footage, but in the aggressive, booming tone, that the journalist was being threatened, that the firearm was being brandished. So why the story about the snake on the porch? What we would also want to know is, once Shannon discovered Gus was missing, what did she do? Remember, she's also kind of got to look after Ronnie. So how long, where, and when did she search for him? And how and when did she alert Josie and Gus's mother, Jessica? And what did they do after that? And at what point did Josie and Jessica and Shannon basically come together? And when that happened, what happened after that? If they searched for 3 hours for Gus, where did they search? Because there should be evidence of footprints of those searches as well, assuming that they searched outside. Now, if you think about it, if you say Gus wandered off, well, then if you're going to search for him, if you believe he wandered off, then you're going to search for him wandering off, and you're going to leave your own footprints, aren't you? Probably the person in the story who has kept the lowest profile of all has been Jessica, Gus's mother. What does she think happened, and where is she? And if she's not with Joshua now, and Joshua is now in a more comfortable digs in Adelaide, why not? Why hasn't that family sort of come together? Anyway, I'm not going to take it further than that. Meanwhile, if you have any questions, let's hear them in the comments. Thank you for listening. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll see you guys next time.